The trembling hands of 78-year-old Dorothy Mae Johnson reached for the can of Fancy Feast chicken pâté as tears rolled down her weathered cheeks. It wasn't for her beloved tabby cat Whiskers, who had passed away 3 months ago. The can was for her own dinner because it was all she could afford. As she opened the small tin with shaking fingers, Dorothy whispered to the empty kitchen that had once been filled with the laughter of her late husband Frank and their 3 children. Little did she know that this moment of deepest despair would soon transform into something beautiful beyond her wildest dreams. Dorothy had lived in the same modest 2-bedroom house in Cedar Falls, Iowa for 47 years. The yellow vinyl siding was now faded and peeling, and the front porch steps creaked with each footstep, but it held a lifetime of precious memories. Frank had carried her across that threshold as his bride in 1967, and together they had raised their children Michael, Sarah, and little Tommy in those rooms filled with love and hope. But life has a way of testing even the strongest hearts. Frank passed away from cancer 5 years ago, leaving Dorothy not just heartbroken but drowning in medical bills that insurance wouldn't cover. Their modest savings evaporated faster than morning dew as she tried to keep up with the mounting costs of his treatment. Then came her own health struggles. Arthritis made her fingers stiff, and painful diabetes required expensive medication, and a minor stroke last year left her with a slight limp and slurred speech that made her feel embarrassed and isolated. Her children had their own struggles. Michael lived in California working 2 jobs to support his family after his wife lost her job during the pandemic. Sarah was going through a difficult divorce in Texas while caring for her special needs daughter. Tommy, the baby of the family, had battled addiction for years, and though he was clean now, he was living in a halfway house in Chicago trying to rebuild his life. Dorothy never wanted to burden them with her problems. She had always been the strong one, the rock they leaned on, and asking for help felt like admitting defeat. The reality of her situation hit hardest at the grocery store. Standing in the canned food aisle, Dorothy would calculate and recalculate, trying to make her $43 in food stamps stretch for the entire month. She had learned that a can of cat food cost 79 cents while a can of human food was often twice that price. The protein content was similar, she told herself, and it filled the gnawing emptiness in her stomach. Pride kept her from visiting the local food bank. What would people think if they saw Dorothy Johnson, the woman who used to organize church bake sales and volunteer at the elementary school, reduced to accepting charity? On this particular Tuesday in November, the first snow of the season was beginning to fall as Dorothy slowly made her way home from Miller's Corner Market. Her old Toyota Camry had broken down last month and she couldn't afford the repairs, so she walked the 8 blocks carrying her small bag of groceries. The cold wind cut through her thin coat and her arthritic knees ached with each step, but she pressed on, determined to maintain what little independence she had left. As she turned onto Maple Street, Dorothy noticed a young woman with curly red hair struggling to carry several heavy grocery bags while pushing a stroller with a fussy toddler. Without thinking, Dorothy approached the stranger despite her own burden and offered to help. The young woman looked up with tired eyes and gratefully accepted. Together they walked the remaining 2 blocks as the little boy gradually stopped crying, soothed by Dorothy's gentle humming of old lullabies. The young woman introduced herself as Emma Richardson and explained that she had just moved to Cedar Falls with her 2-year-old son Jake after leaving an abusive relationship. She was working at the local diner, but childcare was expensive and she was struggling to make ends meet. Dorothy listened with genuine compassion, recognizing the pain behind Emma's brave smile. When they reached Emma's apartment building, Dorothy surprised herself by inviting the young mother and her son over for hot cocoa the next day. That evening, as Dorothy heated her can of cat food, she thought about Emma and little Jake. Despite her own struggles, she couldn't stop thinking about the young mother's tired eyes and the way Jake had smiled when she sang to him. Something stirred in Dorothy's heart that had been dormant since Frank's death. She realized that in helping someone else she had felt useful and needed for the first time in months. The next afternoon, Emma and Jake arrived at Dorothy's door with homemade cookies that Emma had managed to bake with ingredients from the food pantry at her church. As they sat in Dorothy's cozy living room sharing stories, Dorothy learned that Emma was originally from Nebraska and had dreams of becoming a teacher before life took an unexpected turn. Jake warmed up to Dorothy immediately climbing onto her lap and playing with her late husband's old pocket watch that she kept on the coffee table. As the weeks passed, their friendship deepened. Emma would stop by after work to check on Dorothy, and Jake would run straight to his new Grandma Dorothy, as he had started calling her. Dorothy began to look forward to these visits more than anything else in her quiet days. She would save her can of food for dinner after they left, not wanting Emma to know about her situation but grateful for the company that made her forget about her hunger for a while. One evening, while Emma was putting Jake down for a nap on Dorothy's old sofa, she accidentally opened the kitchen cabinet looking for a glass for water. What she saw made her heart break. Row after row of cat food cans lined the shelves with no human food in sight. Emma's nursing background kicked in and she immediately understood what was happening. She had seen elderly patients struggle with food insecurity before, but witnessing it in her dear friend Dorothy was devastating. Emma made a decision that would change both their lives forever. Instead of confronting Dorothy directly, which might embarrass her, she quietly began researching resources in the community. She reached out to the local senior center, the food bank, and several churches. But Emma knew Dorothy's pride would prevent her from accepting direct charity, so she needed a different approach. Emma started volunteering at the Cedar Falls Community Center, where she met Pastor Williams from the Methodist Church and Mrs. Garcia, who ran the senior outreach program. As she shared Dorothy's story without revealing her name, these community leaders were moved to action. They had encountered many seniors who were too proud to ask for help despite desperately needing it, and they wanted to find a way to support Dorothy while preserving her dignity. Meanwhile, Dorothy's health was declining. The lack of proper nutrition was affecting her energy levels, and her diabetes was becoming harder to control. One cold December morning, Emma arrived to find Dorothy had collapsed in her kitchen. After calling 911 and riding with Dorothy to the hospital, Emma sat in the waiting room praying for her dear friend while little Jake slept in her arms. The doctor explained that Dorothy was malnourished and dehydrated. Her blood sugar levels were dangerously erratic and she needed proper nutrition and medication to recover. When Dorothy woke up in the hospital bed, she was embarrassed and ashamed. She tried to explain to Emma that she was fine and just needed to go home, but Emma gently took her hand and told her she knew about the cat food. Dorothy's eyes filled with tears as years of hidden shame and struggle poured out. She told Emma about Frank's medical bills, her own health problems, and how she felt like a burden to everyone. Emma listened with tears in her own eyes and then shared something that surprised Dorothy. She explained that Dorothy had been like an angel to her and Jake, providing the maternal love and support she desperately needed as a young single mother in a new town. Dorothy hadn't been a burden, she had been a blessing. While Dorothy recovered in the hospital, Emma put her plan into motion. She contacted Dorothy's children and with their permission organized a community effort that would honor Dorothy's dignity while providing the help she needed. Michael, Sarah and Tommy were shocked to learn about their mother's situation and immediately began making arrangements to provide better support. But Emma's plan went beyond family assistance. She had learned that Dorothy had been a beloved elementary school teacher for 35 years before retiring and had touched countless lives in Cedar Falls. Emma reached out to former students, colleagues and community members, sharing Dorothy's story and asking for help with a special project. The response was overwhelming. Former students who were now adults with children of their own remembered Mrs. Johnson's kindness and dedication. Colleagues recalled how Dorothy had quietly helped struggling families throughout her teaching career, often buying school supplies and winter coats for children in need. Community members remembered her volunteer work at the food drives and holiday programs for underprivileged families. Pastor Williams suggested they organize a surprise homecoming celebration for Dorothy when she was released from the hospital. The idea quickly grew into something much bigger. The community center became a hub of activity as volunteers organized what they called Dorothy's Gift of Love celebration. When Dorothy was finally discharged from the hospital a week before Christmas, Emma picked her up with Jake in tow. Dorothy expected to return to her empty house, but instead found herself driving through a neighborhood filled with cars and people holding signs that read, "Welcome home, Dorothy, and thank you, Mrs. Johnson." Confused and overwhelmed, Dorothy asked Emma what was happening. As they pulled into Dorothy's driveway, Dorothy gasped. Her yard was decorated with Christmas lights and her front porch was adorned with wreaths and ribbons. Dozens of people were gathered on her lawn, including faces she hadn't seen in years. Former students, now grown with families of their own, held their children's hands as they waited to greet their beloved teacher. Emma helped Dorothy out of the car and the crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Through tears, Dorothy recognized so many faces. There was little Jimmy Patterson, who was now Officer Patterson with the local police department. Susan Martinez, who had become a doctor, stood with her teenage daughter. The Williams twins, who had struggled with reading, were now successful business owners. One by one they approached Dorothy with hugs and words of gratitude for how she had impacted their lives. But the surprises were just beginning. Pastor Williams stepped forward and explained that the community had come together to create the Dorothy Mae Johnson Kindness Fund. Through donations and fundraising efforts, they had raised enough money to pay off her medical bills, cover her monthly expenses for the next 2 years, and ensure she had proper nutrition and health care. The local grocery store had committed to delivering fresh groceries weekly, and the pharmacy would coordinate her medication management. Dorothy was speechless as the gifts kept coming. The high school shop class had repaired her car, and the garden club had arranged for year-round lawn care and snow removal. The local senior center offered free transportation and meals, and several former colleagues volunteered to provide companionship and assistance with daily tasks. Most importantly, Emma and Jake would continue to be her chosen family, visiting regularly and sharing the love that had brought them all together. As Dorothy stood surrounded by the love and support of her community, she realized that her darkest moment had led to her greatest blessing. The years of pride and self-reliance had prevented her from experiencing the joy of being supported by others who genuinely cared about her. Frank would have been amazed to see how the seeds of kindness Dorothy had planted throughout her life had grown into this incredible harvest of love. The celebration continued into the evening with food, music, and storytelling. Children played in Dorothy's yard while adults shared memories of their beloved teacher. Emma stayed close to Dorothy's side, helping her navigate the emotions of such an overwhelming display of love. Little Jake had claimed Dorothy's lap as his special spot and refused to move even when other children wanted to meet his grandma Dorothy. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Dorothy found herself sitting on her front porch with Emma and Jake, watching the snow fall under the glow of her new Christmas lights. The same porch where she had felt so alone and hopeless just weeks before was now filled with warmth and the promise of a brighter future. Emma squeezed Dorothy's hand and reminded her that sometimes we need to be vulnerable to receive the love that's waiting for us. Dorothy nodded, understanding that her willingness to help a struggling young mother despite her own difficulties had opened the door to receiving help in return. The cycle of kindness had come full circle in the most beautiful way. 6 months later, Dorothy was thriving. Her health had improved dramatically with proper nutrition and medical care, and she had found new purpose in mentoring other seniors who were struggling with isolation and pride. Emma had enrolled in online classes to pursue her teaching degree with Dorothy as her inspiration and study partner. Jake called Dorothy his grandma and spent his afternoons learning to read with the patience and love of his favorite teacher. The Dorothy Mae Johnson Kindness Fund had grown into a community program that helped other seniors in similar situations, always with dignity and respect. Dorothy became the program spokesperson, sharing her story to encourage others to accept help when they needed it and to remind everyone that kindness multiplies when we have the courage to both give and receive it. Dorothy's story reminds us that our darkest moments often precede our greatest breakthroughs. Sometimes we need to swallow our pride and accept help from others, and sometimes we need to offer help even when we feel we have nothing to give. The magic happens when hearts connect across circumstances and when communities come together to lift up those who have spent their lives lifting others. If Dorothy's story has touched your heart, we encourage you to like this video and share it with someone who might need a reminder that they are not alone. Subscribe to Pure Kindness Stories for more heartwarming tales that celebrate the power of human compassion, and don't forget to look around your own community for opportunities to be someone's unexpected blessing. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness creates the biggest miracle of all.